Have you ever wished, that you could legally read your competitor's mind? Just imagine knowing exactly what their next major product launch is going to be.
Right, or pinpointing their biggest operational weakness a months before they even send out a press release.
Exactly. I mean, it sounds like the plot of a corporate thriller, but what if that level of strategic insight is actually sitting right there, like completely out in the open?
Just waiting for someone who knows how to look.
Yeah. Which brings us to the materials we're diving into today. We've got this massive master analysis suite built around a system by a pseudonymous expert named John Nolan.
His book, Uncover You, Competitors' Top Business Secrets Legally and Quickly and Protect Your Own.
Right. And the cover art is actually really striking. It features this big red confidential stamp and the image of a document held together by an actual binder clip. It signals right away that this isn't some dense theoretical textbook.
No, not at all. It's a practical, almost raw operational dossier, and that visual aesthetic perfectly matches Nolan's core thesis, which is that business is essentially a silent war of information.
Silent war.
Yeah. Market leaders aren't necessarily working harder than you, and, they aren't always hiring smarter people. They just have superior knowledge. They can see the entire chessboard more clearly than their competitors.
Well, okay, let's unpack this. Our mission for this deep dive is to serve as your shortcut to mastering this silent information war. We want to walk you through exactly how to ethically gather competitive intelligence, how to analyze that data to anticipate your competitor's next move.
And because the sword obviously swings both ways, how to build an operational fortress to protect your own company's secrets.
Yes. But before anyone starts digging into their competitor's public footprint, we have to establish the boundaries of the playing field.
We really do, because this isn't about industrial espionage or corporate spies hiding in trench coats. If you don't understand what legal actually means in the realm of competitive intelligence, you aren't just risking a PR nightmare or, a civil lawsuit.
You're risking serious federal prison time.
Exactly. You are risking federal prison. So we need to draw a very thick line in the sand. Nolan is adamant throughout his framework that competitive intelligence is not hacking.
Right.
It is not digging through a locked dumpster on private property, and it certainly isn't slipping an employee $1,000 for a peek at their internal roadmap.
Yeah, so it's basically...
What's fascinating here is how Nolan forces you to rethink your entire posture. He wants you to transition from being what he calls a reactive operator.
Which is a company that just waits to see a competitor's new product launch and then scrambles in a panic to catch up.
Right, exactly. Transition from that to what he calls a strategic pragmatist. And a strategic pragmatist operates with surgical precision within three major legal frameworks. First, there's the Economic Espionage Act of 1996. Which made the theft or misappropriation of a trade secret a federal criminal offense. Second, you have the Uniform Trade Secrets Act, or UTSA. Most states have adopted this to provide civil remedies.
So if you steal a secret, they can just sue you into oblivion.
Oh, absolutely. And third is the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, the CFAA.
Okay, let me try to put those laws into like an everyday analogy. Think of your competitor's business as a physical house.
Sure.
If you are standing on the public sidewalk observing who comes in and out of the front door, or you're reading the name printed on the side of their delivery vans, that is perfectly legal. That is competitive intelligence.
Right. The public vantage point is everything.
But the second you try to guess their Wi-Fi password to see what they are doing inside, which violates the CFAA, or you bribe their housekeeper to hand over a floor plan, you have crossed the line from clever observation into felony territory.
That's a perfect analogy because the law actually provides a surprisingly specific definition of what constitutes a trade secret. It isn't just, any piece of sensitive information.
Oh, really?
Yeah. To be protected under something like the UTSA, the information must not be generally known to the public. It must provide a distinct economic advantage specifically because it is kept secret, and this is where most companies fail. The owner must make reasonable efforts to maintain its secrecy.
Wait, so if I understand that reasonable effort clause correctly, if a company's lead engineer goes to a public coffee shop, gets up to use the restroom, and just leaves a highly valuable proprietary blueprint sitting wide open on the table, and you happen to walk by and read it, they essentially forfeited their protection.
They absolutely failed to make a reasonable effort. The law generally takes the stance that if a company doesn't care enough to protect its own information, well, the courts aren't going to protect it for them.
Wow.
Yeah. Nolan summarizes this entire legal minefield with a very simple golden rule. If you have to ask whether an action is legal, it probably is not. When your intuition tells you something feels murky, you stop immediately and consult an attorney.
That makes sense. So with those boundaries clearly set, let's talk about the actual mechanics of gathering this information. If we are stuck on the public sidewalk, how do we harvest enough data to actually understand a competitor's strategy?
Right. So the first step is what Nolan calls discovery, and it relies heavily on open source intelligence, or OSINT.
OSINT.
Yeah, OSINT is the systematic mining of information that companies voluntarily or legally must put out into the world. And the absolute gold mine for this is financial and regulatory documentation.
Especially for public companies.
Exactly. If your competitor is publicly traded, the SEC requires them to file extremely detailed reports. The 10K, which is the annual report, and the 10Q, the quarterly report.
I think a lot of people look at an SEC filing and just see, a wall of impenetrable accounting jargon.
Yeah.
Where, specifically in a 10K, should someone be looking to find actual strategic intelligence?
You skip the raw spreadsheets entirely. You go straight to the section titled Management's Discussion and Analysis, or the MD&A.
The MD&A, okay.
Because this is where executives are legally obligated to explain the why behind the numbers. And more importantly, they have to list their forward-looking risk factors. They literally have to confess their nightmares to the shareholders.
Oh, wow. So you might read the MD&A and discover that, 80% of their entire supply chain relies on a single factory in a politically unstable region.
Exactly. Or you might find out that a huge portion of their revenue comes from just 2 major clients. That isn't just a financial footnote. That is a massive operational vulnerability you can exploit.
So you're finding the cracks in their armor by reading their own mandatory disclosures.
Yes. And beyond financial reports, you can constantly monitor patent and trademark databases. If a company files a patent for a new type of, say, thermal cooling array, that is a public declaration of where their research and development dollars are going.
You are literally looking at their technology roadmap years before they have a commercial product ready to launch.
Right. Nolan calls this passive listening. You set up automated alerts so the algorithms do the heavy lifting, just delivering these public filings directly to your inbox. It creates a constant feed of strategic breadcrumbs.
Okay, but I have to push back on one of the primary sources Nolan suggests for this, job postings.
Oh, the job postings.
Yeah, I look at boards like Indeed and LinkedIn all the time, and the postings are incredibly vague. A company will post a listing for a software engineer 2 or a project manager. It's just a public billboard saying they have an empty desk. How is parsing through generic HR requests considered high-level intelligence?
Well, if you look at one isolated job posting, yeah, it is generic. The intelligence comes from aggregation and decoding the sudden shifts in hiring velocity.
What do you mean?
The competitor thinks they are just backfilling a few roles, but to an observer tracking the data over time, they are broadcasting a pivot. Nolan illustrates this with a fantastic case study about a software startup. This startup was basically treading water, trying to figure out what their main, larger competitor was going to do next. Then, the startup noticed a sudden, highly specific cluster of job postings.
Oh, I see.
The competitor wasn't just hiring a generic engineer, they were urgently looking for an iOS developer with deep biometrics and encryption experience.
Okay, that's a huge tell. A sudden demand for biometrics on a mobile platform.
Exactly. The startup's team looked at that posting and instantly translated it. The competitor was secretly building a fingerprint authentication feature. Now, the startup had actually brainstormed that exact feature a year prior, but shelved it because they didn't think the market was ready.
But seeing that cluster of job postings was the validation they needed.
Right. They immediately pulled their old project off the shelf, poured all their resources into it, and because they had a head start on the foundational code, they beat the massive competitor to market by 6 months.
All because an HR manager published a public job description. They told the world exactly what they were building.
And this scales up dramatically. If an automotive company hires one battery engineer, it's a hire. If over the course of 3 weeks, they hire 15 engineers specializing in lithium-ion thermal regulation.
An electric vehicle project is moving into active production.
You've got it. It's about recognizing the clusters.
That is wild.
Yeah.
But the discovery process doesn't stop at digital data, right? There's an entire human element to this, which brings us to human intelligence. This is the fine art of the ethical interview.
Yes, and the word ethical cannot be stressed enough here. In the realm of legal human, you never use a false identity, You never misrepresent who you work for. You never ask an employee to violate their non-disclosure agreement.
And you never secretly record a conversation.
Never.
But you are absolutely allowed to walk the floor of a public industry trade show. You can pick up every piece of marketing collateral sitting on a competitor's table. You can strike up a casual, friendly conversation with their sales reps about the new features on their display model.
And when you are having those conversations, you can employ a psychological tactic Nolan refers to as the Columbo technique.
Oh, named after the classic TV detective with the trench coat and the cigar.
That's the one.
He always seemed confused, but he was actually the smartest guy in the room.
That's the exact dynamic. When you are chatting with a supplier or a competitor's booth staff, you conduct the normal conversation and then you wrap it up. You say your goodbyes, you turn around, and you start to walk away.
Okay.
You let the tension of the interaction completely drop. Psychologically, the person you are talking to thinks the interview is over. Their guard comes down, their brain relaxes.
I see where this is going.
And right at that moment, you turn back, put your hand on the proverbial doorknob, and ask your most important strategic follow-up question. Like, oh, by the way, when did you say that new software patch was rolling out?
Catching them in the threshold.
Exactly. Because the defenses are down, they are statistically much more likely to give you a direct, unguarded answer.
So let's say we've gathered all this material. We've downloaded the SEC filings, we've decoded the clusters of job postings, and we've casually interviewed people at trade shows. We can even gather technical intelligence by lawfully purchasing their product, right? Like, you can buy their newest machine, put it in your lab, and completely tear it apart.
Sure. You can look at the internal serial numbers to figure out who their hidden suppliers are, or stress test the materials to discover physical weaknesses. That is generally fair game.
Okay, but
With one major caveat that trips a lot of companies up:
the shrink wrap license.
the shrink wrap license. If you buy a physical hammer, you can melt it down. But if you buy a piece of software or hardware running proprietary software, you often agree to an end-user license agreement simply by opening the package or booting it up.
Right, and those agreements almost always contain strict clauses forbidding reverse engineering.
So if you ignore that contract and decompile their code, you've moved from legal technical intelligence right into a breach of contract.
Okay, assuming we've navigated the licenses legally, gathering a mountain of physical teardowns, 10Ks, and job postings creates a massive new problem data overload.
Right.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Having 100 open source puzzle pieces scattered across your desk doesn't help you at all if you refuse to look at the picture on the front of the box. Analysis is putting the pieces together to find out where the gaps are. How do you find the actual signal in all that noise?
You have to build a structured analytical model. Raw data without context is just noise. So Nolan provides a competitor profile template to force this discipline.
Okay.
You take your data and systematically map out their financial capacity, their distribution channels, and even the psychological profiles of their executive team.
And once you build that profile, you engage in what Nolan calls wargaming or red teaming.
Yes.
You actually take a group of your own employees and assign them the role of the competitor. You put them in a room and ask, based on everything we now know about their cash flow and their new battery tech, how would they attack us?
It forces you out of your own company's echo chamber. The psychology behind red teaming is vital because competitors rarely make random, chaotic moves.
Right. Businesses are run by human beings who operate in highly predictable cycles.
Exactly. Public companies have intense quarterly earnings pressures. Retailers have seasonal manufacturing deadlines. When you map out their profile through red teaming, you begin to recognize their historical triggers.
Like, what specific market condition caused them to slash prices last time?
Yeah. Or when a supply chain bottleneck happens, do they typically lay people off or take on debt? Once you understand the mechanism behind their past decisions, you can preemptively block their next move.
It perfectly illustrates Nolan's maxim. Intelligence without action is entertainment. Action without intelligence is gambling.
Well said. You have to connect the scattered data to a concrete strategic decision.
Which brings us to the mirror image of this entire process. If it is this straightforward for you to legally reverse engineer your competitor's entire strategy using public filings, job boards, and trade show conversations,
you have to operate under the assumption that they are doing the exact same thing to you right now.
yeah, this is the operational fortress part. How do we plug the leaks? Nolan points out that a company's biggest vulnerabilities rarely involve complex corporate espionage. The massive leak points are usually entirely mundane.
So mundane.
It's an enthusiastic employee taking a selfie in the office and posting it to social media, not realizing that the whiteboard in the background outlines next year's marketing budget. Or it's the metadata hidden inside the digital files on your public website.
Metadata is a massive blind spot for most organizations.
It really is.
Hmm.
A lot of people don't realize that when you take a simple photograph of your new warehouse facility with a smartphone and upload it to a press release, that image file often contains EXIF data.
Right. It invisibly embeds the exact GPS coordinates of where you were standing, the date, and the time.
Or your company publishes a PDF white paper about industry trends, but you forget to scrub the document properties. A competitor downloads it, checks the file author tags, and realizes the document was actually authored by a highly specialized boutique merger and acquisition consulting firm.
Suddenly, the competitor knows you're preparing to buy another company.
Yes, and
Yeah.
then there are the physical security failures. Nolan details a case study about an unsecured dumpster.
Oh, that one. Yeah.
A manufacturing firm was generating highly sensitive prototype drawings. When they were done with a draft, instead of shredding it, an employee just tossed the papers into a regular trash bin sitting in the company's open public parking lot.
Which is public property.
Exactly. A competitor's analyst, knowing the laws around abandoned property in public spaces, legally retrieved those drawings. Now, in this specific instance, the competitor consulted their legal counsel and decided not to exploit the information, but it exposed a catastrophic systemic security failure on the part of the manufacturer.
And the leaks don't just come from your own property either. There is a deeply frustrating case study in the materials about an overconfident supplier.
Oh, I remember this.
Let's say you are building a revolutionary new widget. You hire a specialized vendor to manufacture a specific internal gear. That vendor goes to an industry conference, hits the hotel bar, and ends up talking to a shared customer.
Right.
Trying to inflate their own importance, the vendor starts bragging, "Oh yeah, we are running at maximum capacity right now. We just got an order for 2 million microgears from Company X for their big new expansion."
And that customer goes home, mentions the gossip to their boss, and within a week, your secret expansion plans are industry knowledge months before you wanted to announce them.
This raises an important question regarding supply chain management. You can force your own internal employees to sign airtight non-disclosure agreements, but how do you effectively control the mouth of a third-party supplier sitting at a hotel bar?
Exactly the problem. I can put NDAs on my own team, but I have zero control over an overconfident vendor trying to impress a client.
Well, you cannot control the vendor's mouth, but you absolutely can control the vendor's knowledge. This is where Nolan introduces the concept of OPSE, or operational security, heavily leaning on the principle of need to know.
Okay.
You have to tightly compartmentalize your information. The supplier manufacturing that microgear needs the exact dimensions of the metal. They do not need to know the name of the final product, the marketing launch date, or what the fully assembled machine actually does.
You limit the blast radius.
Exactly. If you only give them an isolated puzzle piece, then even if they do brag at a bar, they have no actionable strategic intelligence to give away.
That is a critical shift in how you manage external contracts. But let's say the leaks are happening despite your best efforts. Nolan also talks about counterintelligence actively recognizing when your company is being targeted. What are the red flags we should be looking for?
One of the most common red flags occurs during the hiring process. You might receive an application for a very low-level, entry-level position, but during the interview, the candidate bypasses the basic role requirements and starts aggressively probing into your company's long-term roadmap.
Asking highly strategic questions about your R&D budget that a junior associate would never need to know.
Right. Or you suddenly receive overly detailed inquiries from graduate students or independent researchers who claim to be doing an academic paper, but their questions are probing a little too deeply into your specific pricing margins.
Or perhaps the most painful indicator, you consistently keep losing contract bids to the exact same rival, and they always seem to underbid you by exactly 1%.
They clearly know your internal pricing floors. If you spot these red flags and suspect a leak, Nolan suggests deploying a honeypot.
Okay, a honeypot sounds great in spy movies, but how does a normal business execute a canary trap without ruining their own internal data or just causing chaos?
You have to use watermarked, distinct information. If you suspect that a specific department or a particular third-party vendor is leaking your bids, you intentionally feed them false, but highly unique information.
Oh, I see.
You might give vendor A a dummy blueprint with a very specific, slightly altered dimension. You give vendor B a blueprint with a different altered dimension. Then you sit back and monitor the market.
And if your competitor suddenly rushes a product to market featuring the exact altered dimension you gave to vendor B,
You haven't just confirmed you are being watched. You have positively identified exactly which vendor breached your fortress.
you literally tag the data and track it through the ecosystem. That's brilliant. We've covered a massive amount of ground here today, from defining the strict federal boundaries of the playing field to reading the hidden confessions in SEC filings, decoding job board clusters, and executing counterintelligence honeypots.
We have.
But for someone listening to this right now, how do they actually apply this on Monday morning?
Nolan makes the transition from theory to practice highly actionable with a 30-day implementation plan.
Okay, what's week one?
Week 1 focuses entirely on assessment and inventory. You map out your competitive landscape, audit your current knowledge gaps, and aggressively identify your own internal leak points, like those metadata protocols we talked about.
And week two?
Week 2 is discovery. This is when you automate your OSINT. You set up the Google alerts, establish the patent watches, and begin tracking the job boards.
Moving into week three, the focus shifts to protection. And that's when you tighten up the OPSC, you update those vendor NDAs, implement rigid digital security protocols like mandatory two-factor authentication, and most importantly, you sit your employees down and train them on what legally constitutes a trade secret.
Yes, so they stop talking about strategy in public coffee shops.
Exactly. Finally, week four is analyze and act. You build out the competitor profile templates, launch your first red team exercise, and start making strategic decisions based on hard data rather than gut feelings.
By the end of those 4 weeks, you have fundamentally transformed your posture. You transition from a company operating blindly in the dark to an organization equipped with a functioning intelligence apparatus and a heavily secured perimeter.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? It means that the closely guarded secrets you assume are entirely inaccessible are actually out there right now, waiting for you to aggregate them. The strategic landscape of your entire industry is being painted every single day across mandatory financial disclosures, patent filings, and the casual conversations happening at trade shows.
It really is.
But it also serves as a stark warning. You must build your watchtower and secure your own fortress immediately, because the silent war of information never stops, and you are already a target.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, I want to leave you with one final forward-looking thought to consider.
Let's hear it.
Think about the sheer volume of tasks we've discussed today. Manually reading the MD&A sections of SEC documents, tracking clusters of job board postings, scanning patent registries, and identifying behavioral triggers. Right now, that process requires a dedicated human analyst painstakingly connecting the dots.
True.
But imagine an AI system running continuously in the background, capable of scraping every single one of those public breadcrumbs for every company in your industry simultaneously, in real time. It could instantly generate and update red team profiles without a human ever lifting a finger.
Wow.
In the next 5 to 10 years, as these algorithms become exponentially more sophisticated, will the legal and practical concept of a trade secret even exist anymore? Or are we rapidly entering an era where every company's strategic roadmap is completely transparent to the machines, regardless of how high they build their fortress walls?
If that level of automated transparency is the future, then learning the mechanics of how to legally read your competitor's mind today isn't just a temporary market advantage. It is the absolute baseline requirement for your survival.